Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Senate Education Committee. It's February 6th, 2019. Today we have a few bills up for public hearing. At the end of the day, we'll be work sessioning two of the three bills that are listed, and we'll talk about those when we get to them. I am actually going to use the board chair's prerogative here and take these a little bit out of order from what they're posted outside, because I do think that we're looking for potentially a member or two to come testify on one of these bills. So I'm going to open public hearing on Senate Bill 1539, designating Oregon Institute of Technology as Oregon's Polytechnic University. And I'll look to our exceedingly able committee administrator to provide us a brief overview and then ask folks who are signed up to testify to please volunteer to come forward. And if I could, and I don't mean to cut you off before you even have an opportunity to speak, we have a busy agenda today, so if there is an opportunity, if you have written testimony, we will always read it and consider it very intentionally. But if there is a way just to respect the fact that a lot of people are here to testify on other bills, maybe a brief summary would be great. At first, I'm going to turn over to Lisa Gazelter.
Chair Wagner, members of the committee, Senate Bill 1539 designates the Oregon Institute of Technology as Oregon's Polytechnic University.
Greetings.
Good afternoon. Trustee Ziari.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Wagner and member of committee. I'm Fred Ziari. I'm the member of the Board of Trustees for Oregon Tech. And I've been a member from the very beginning. I'm speaking also both as a member and also founder of 4 different engineering companies, and I'm president of those. And as such, we always looking for talents such as Oregon Tech to hire, and so we can grow our businesses both here in the U.S. and also globally. It is an honor to be here today to talk to you about Oregon Tech's request to be designated as the Oregon's Polytechnic University, and why we feel so strongly about its importance to our students, the university, and as well as state of Oregon. Our Board of Trustees have taken an in-depth process in collaboration with all the stakeholders to update our university's mission and ensure its alignment with the goals of the state of Oregon. We look forward to discussing these updates with you today and through the passage of SB 1539. And we look to further partnership with you, the HEC, and that will serve the needs of Oregon's students and Oregon's university.
Wrong one.
Just a little bit of a history. Oregon Tech was founded in 1947. We are the youngest of the universities. The first campus was converted from a Marine rehab center in Klamath Fall. Its original purpose was to retrain returning World War II veterans in technical fields that were much needed at that time, and which aligned with their experience gained during military services. As time went on, Oregon Tech became part of the Oregon University system. The university expanded into offering bachelor's degree in many areas, and as well we developed a master plan campuses in the early 1960s that would include areas of geothermal heat for the university to reduce university utility costs. It also helped the Oregon Techs to focus the universities to harness renewable energy long before it was in vogue. During 1990s, Oregon Tech began offering many specialized master's degrees. I'm very happy to report to you that by 2021, we will begin offering our first doctoral degrees in physical therapy, which is in collaboration with OHSU.
Dr. Ziari, I'm so I see 11 slides here and multiple pages of written testimony. Is there any way that you could submit your written testimony, give us just the nuggets about the history and the real import? I hate to do that to you, but we have dozens of people signed up to testify on other bills. So
our mission statement is really where
Okay.
we want to focus.
Perfect.
Why we are becoming Oregon Polytechnic. This is the what we adopted, and which was adopted by HEC last August. I turn it over to President Naganathan to continue with the
thank you so much, and
presentation.
thanks for your understanding. During short sessions, sometimes we're really compressed. Yep.
Good afternoon. I will give you the FedEx version of this presentation. First of all, the next slide, what is a Polytechnic University? Briefly, it's a technological university that approaches teaching and learning to a hands-on approach. Our students do it by projects right from first year all the way to the end, and we intentionally hire faculty with industry background. Next slide. There are lots of things to mention here. One of the reasons this is important for Oregon and our students, when we did a DHA market research study, 42% thought Oregon Tech was not a four-year university, and 27% did not even recognize we are a public university. So there's a lot of awareness that needs to be created so students can really use the advantages of a Polytechnic University. On the other hand, more than 300 students participated in the survey, and in there, 97% were very happy with their experience, and 94% said they would certainly recommend Oregon Tech to other students. So these are affirming statements from the students. Next slide. One of the things we are very proud of are the many success rates. 97% is the success rate for our students. We command the highest return on investment. Also, they have it in the packet of information. Georgetown University just put out a ranking. They ranked 4,500 universities and colleges in the United States. Oregon Tech was ranked in the top 4% in the nation. So next slide. So you can see the growth at Oregon Tech in terms of we have 35% more in headcount over the last 10 years, both at the university student level as well as in high school dual credit level. And this fall, our freshmen grew by 14%. Last fall, they grew by 9%. So there has been a lot of elevated student interest in these programs. Next slide. We already have a statewide footprint as approved by HEC, and here there is one more opportunity to make it more impactful. Next slide. This is showing the kind of demands. These are some of the new programs that have been created recently, and we are excited about the new doctorate in physical therapy we are going to be launching in partnership with OHSU. Next slide. So this is an example. This is OMIC R&D. Our freshmen are involved in working with equipment we can't imagine buying in any of the universities. They get to work with the best, with 32 corporate partners in terms of working on very special projects. So I would like to conclude at this time. I want to thank you. I know your schedule is packed. We appreciate the opportunity to present it here today, and we respectfully request your support for Oregon Tech to be designated as Oregon's Polytechnic University. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to field.
Truly appreciate it, and also appreciate the expedited attention. I haven't heard a lot of opposition. I think there's a lot of pride that people have with Oregon Tech, and I've heard universal support in moving this direction. I would like to open it to any senators if they have any specific targeted questions. All right, and with that, thank you so much for your testimony.
Very much.
No one else is set to testify on that? Okay, so we're going to close public hearing on Senate Bill 1539. Are we waiting for Senator Fagan?
Yeah, you could. I walked in with
There
her,
we
but
go.
she's.
Awesome. Right on cue. Okay, so we are going to open public hearing on Senate Bill 1501 with, I see State Senator Shania Fagan. And then would you want to pull folks up we'll just let the senator testify. Do you want to give a brief bill summary?
Sure.
And then we'll turn it over. Thank you for being here. I know it's kind of a busy day.
Senate Bill, Chair Wagner, members of the committee. Senate Bill 1501 establishes the rights of student athletes to earn compensation for coaching and for use of their name, image, or likeness. It establishes the rights of student athletes to retain professional representation, prohibits universities, athletic associations, conferences, or organizations from infringing on those rights or penalizing a student athlete who exercises those rights. The bill takes effect January 1, 2023. The -3 amendment removes the definition of official team activities, modifies the rights of students to earn compensation for coaching at market rates, and prohibits student athletes from entering into contracts that conflict with the student athlete's team rules or contracts entered into by the student's post-secondary institution of education and a third party.
And can I ask, before I turn over to Senator Fagan, I believe there is a posted amendment?
The -3.
The -3 is posted. Okay, thank you. Senator Fagan.
Thank you, Chair Wagner, Vice Chair Thompson, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Shamia Fagan. My gender pronouns are she and her, and I'm the state senator for Senate District 24. I am certainly here as a senator supporting this bill, but I'm also here as a mom because of my 7-year-old son's absolute favorite basketball player. And this basketball player is the pride here in Oregon and currently not only holds the record for the most triple doubles during any college basketball game in all of time, but is breaking their own record every week that they play a game. And that is, of course, the Oregon Ducks' own Sabrina Ionescu, who is a fantastic basketball player to watch. She was one of the first women college, maybe the first, I haven't seen that anyone else, but at least one of the first, if not the first women's college basketball player to have her number featured on a jersey, to have Nike sell, and those jerseys sold out in a day. Average game attendance has more than quadrupled since her arrival with the Oregon Ducks, and even away games featuring the University of Oregon report increased attendance. And yet, as of under current law, student athletes are not allowed to secure representation or endorsements. They don't have ownership over their own name, image, and likeness, can't receive compensation for when those images and likenesses are sold to the benefit of other people making money. And so this bill, Senate Bill 1501, is in line with what California passed. And if we're lucky, LeBron James maybe will come to our signing ceremony, as he came and sat with Governor Gavin Newsom, as Gavin Newsom signed the bill in California. And Senate Bill 1501 will allow student athletes like Sabrina Ionescu to secure representation and endorsements, maintain ownership over their name, image, and likeness, and protect them from retaliation when they seek or receive compensation. And they'll also be able to coach in the summer without going through the red tape of the NCAA. There is an amendment that I believe that some of the other folks are going to speak to from U of O, kind of a consensus amendment. I will close by just quoting one of my favorite radio hosts, Peter Sagal, from NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, when he talked about California passing this bill, and if no other states fall in line, that all good athletes are going to want to go play in California. And so Peter Sagal preemptively congratulated the 2023 national football champions, the Bakersfield Cosmetology School. And so I think that other states, I believe that 27 other states are considering this legislation. It seems like something Oregon needs to get behind. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much. Questions of Senator Fagan? My only comment would be, maybe LeBron won't show up, but we can get some Lillard time. I'd be psyched for that too. So, and I know that the governor will be at between the first and second quarters of the Trailblazers game today to be able to commemorate today being the 50th anniversary of the franchise. So today is Trailblazers Day too. But thank you for your testimony. I would also like to know that Senator Peter Courtney wishes that he was here to testify. I know he was working in partnership with you on this legislation, and that he, Senate President's office is also in full support.
Great.
So thank you so much, Senator. All right. Panel, I'm going to do my best on names. So it looks like Haley Briscoe, Rob Mullins, and Becca Goss, or maybe Goss, I'm not sure. But if you could come forward, identify yourself for the record, and tell us why you support the legislation. Looks like support, or neutral.
Neutral.
Neutral, okay. And whoever would like to begin, just please start. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair Wagner, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rob Mullins, and I currently serve as the Director of Athletics at the University of Oregon, an NCAA Division I institution and a member of the Pac-12 Conference. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. We appreciate that lawmakers in the state of Oregon are interested in this important issue, and we are appreciative of the opportunity to provide our input in the -3 amendment to this bill. Public universities, the Pac-12, and the NCAA have all recognized that changes are needed related to the name, image, likeness, and we are committed to working collaboratively with states, conferences, and the NCAA to implement flexibility for student athletes while maintaining all the positive aspects of the collegiate athletic experience. I've worked with student athletes for more than 20 years in athletics administrations in Maryland, Kentucky, and Oregon. At times, I believe that sometimes we forget that college students, mostly between the ages of 18 and 22, balance the demands of their sport, their academic pursuits, their social lives, their community service, and in many cases, their families. It is a difficult balancing act, and they certainly deserve the extensive support that we provide to them. Let me share with you how the public universities in Oregon, namely UO and Oregon State University, currently support our student athletes, and then take a moment to lay out for you the national landscape regarding the discussions on the NIL, name, image, and likeness issue. Today, when a student comes to the University of Oregon or to Oregon State University and participates in any one of our athletic programs, they are students first. As you can imagine, very few of our student athletes go pro, and the value of a college degree should be a top priority in addition to excelling in their athletic arena. Our universities provide a wide array of benefits focused on supporting students as they pursue these degrees, including academic advising, tutoring, mentoring, learning specialty appointments, and much more. From a health and wellness standpoint, all student athletes have exceptional care, which includes no-cost access to physicians, medical testing, rehabilitation, athletic-related injury care for years beyond post-competition, nutrition assessment, and of course, mental health resources. Moreover, we've led the way in ensuring that we take a holistic approach to supporting student athletes, from providing leadership training to career development seminars. We've been providing these services for years and will continue to look for ways to enhance that student athlete experience. We have submitted a memo for the committee today that outlines in detail the support that we provide for student athletes. I would encourage you to review this list. Senate Bill 1501 deals primarily with the potential name, image, and likeness benefits available to student athletes, but I also think it's important for you to know that what campuses are already doing to support these individuals on a daily basis. Within the NCAA and on campuses across America, discussions surrounding NIL have been underway for some time. In May 2019, the NCAA Board of Governors announced the creation of a working group to study potential processes whereby a student athlete's name, image, and likeness could be monetized in a fashion that would be consistent with the NCAA's core values, mission, and principles. The working group includes representatives from all NCAA divisions and includes presidents, conference commissioners, directors of athletics, as well as student athletes. The group was charged with examining possible changes to NCAA bylaws that are tethered to education, maintain a clear line of demarcation between professional and college sports, and further align student athletes with the general student body. In October of 2019, the working group provided a report with recommended actions to the NCAA Board of Governors, comprised of university presidents and chancellors. The board unanimously supported the comprehensive recommendations from the working group to permit student athletes to benefit from the use of their name, image, and likeness in a manner consistent with the collegiate model. The board simultaneously directed each division to immediately create new rules and policies regarding NIL and to finalize them no later than January of 2021. Each division has established a process for gathering feedback from member institutions and developing recommendations for consideration. The NCAA, the Pac-12, UO, and OSU are committed to evolving to meet the needs and desires of student athletes and have commenced the process of modernizing bylaws and policies related to name, image, and likeness. This modernization for the future is a natural extension of the numerous steps NCAA members have taken in recent years to improve support for student athletes, including the opportunity to receive cost of attendance, receive unlimited meals, multi-year scholarships, and medical coverage after graduation. With regard to Senate Bill 1501, we are grateful for the opportunity to provide input to the Senate. As multiple states consider similar bills, we are concerned that a patchwork state-by-state approach will result in an uneven playing field and could even have Title IX implications. Name, image, and likeness is a complex matter, and its unregulated use could result in potential unintended consequences which would negatively impact the recruiting environment and serve as a slippery slope towards the professionalization of college sports. Ultimately, we believe that a federal solution will be needed, but in the meantime, we appreciate the work that has been done to align state-level legislation to the greatest extent possible. I want to close today by thanking Senator Courtney for his commitment to student athletes from his time at Western Oregon University to his work on protecting our student athletes from predatory agent activity, and now for his leadership on Senate Bill 1501. His track record is long, and the student athletes in Oregon are better off because of his commitment. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and happy to answer any questions.
Appreciate that. And I would just ask, I don't know if there's a way that you could try to keep your testimony limited to maybe 2 or 3 minutes each would be really helpful. And then just whoever wants to identify themselves for the record, we'd appreciate it.
For the record, this is Becca Gose. I'm General Counsel for Oregon State University. Chair Wagner and members of the committee, I'm only here for questions, so you don't need to include me unless you have questions.
All right,
I'll turn it over to Hallie.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair Wagner and members of the committee. My name is Hallie Briscoe, pronouns she and her. I'm a gymnast with Oregon State University. I also serve as the Student Athlete Advisory Committee President at OSU and the chair of the Pac-12 Student Athlete Leadership Team, also known as SALT. Last year's passage of California's SB 206 has driven the discussion around name, image, and likeness. As student athletes, we are the ones who will be directly affected by the future legislation and rules. Through the SALT process, we agreed that the current amateur rules place unnecessary restrictions on various areas of professional development and entrepreneurship for student athletes. The allowance for student athletes to use their name, image, and likeness could create opportunities to start successful future careers after collegiate athletics. The SALT discussions recognize that many of the state name, image, and likeness bills under consideration only support the top elite 2% of athletes, mostly consisting of football and men's basketball players. I support these outstanding athletes to benefit, but I also care about the remaining 98%. I fear unintended consequences, including a patchwork of inconsistent state laws, unfair recruiting and competitive advantages, difficulty monitoring compensation, inequitable treatment of female athletes, and the exploitation of athletes by profession and commercial enterprises. This is why SALT proposed a name, image, and likeness clearinghouse that would be independent of universities. The provisions of the clearinghouse have been submitted to the committee for your review. This is a provision that we see operating at the national level in conjunction with NCAA. In response to California's passage of SB 206, I recognize the desire for other states to follow suit. I would prefer to see this issue be addressed nationally with student athletes at the table. However, I appreciate the opportunity to share the student athletes' perspective today. The -3 amendments do better align with California and address some of SALT's concerns. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your testimony. Really appreciate it. Any questions of this panel? All right. Thank you again. Last person to testify on this bill, I'm going to do my best, Ramond Huma, National College Players Association. Are we? No? Ramagi Huma? M-A...
It's H-U-M-A.
H-U-M-A is the last name. It's spelled H-U-M-A?
That looks like me walking along here.
Okay. Well, we aren't going to move the bill today, so what we'll do is close public hearing on House or Senate Bill 1501. We're going to move into, just hold on one second. Okay, all right, that's, yeah. We're going to open a public hearing on 1544. Am I looking? Yeah, okay, good. And then I'm going to turn over to Lisa Gazelter to give us a little bit of a summary. And we have quite a list of folks that are interested in testifying on this bill today. So, so I'll start calling people up 3 at a time, but we'll do a little bit of a brief bill intro first.
Chair Wagner, members of the committee, Senate Bill 1544 requires the Higher Education Coordinating Commission to adopt rules establishing minimum standards for for-profit private colleges and career schools that ensure that at least 10% of the annual revenue received by licensed career schools comes from sources other than institutional loans or federal funds. The bill establishes penalties for violating the rules enacted by HEC. The -2 amendment changes the definition of annual revenue to include only revenue from tuition and makes technical changes.
Okay, first panel is Raymond Curtis, Jim Willis, and Jack LaBox.
Forgive me, Jack LaBox just stepped out for a quick moment. He's coming
okay.
right back. But I can go ahead and get started and we'll just...
You're testifying in his stead?
No, he will be here in just a moment. He
Okay.
just
And you are?
Raymond Curtis. I'm
Oh,
Raymond
okay.
Curtis.
All right. Well, if you want to identify yourself for the record, and we'll get going.
Good morning, Chair Wagner, Vice Chair Thompson, members of the committee. My name is Raymond Curtis. I am a fourth-generation combat veteran, and I am the State Policy Manager for Veterans Education Success. We are a veteran service organization that works to ensure veterans' higher education success and to protect and defend the integrity and the promise of the GI Bill. And we're grateful that Oregon is focusing on protecting students from predatory practices because we know how critical post-secondary education is to the economic success. Due to a loophole in federal law, for-profit college chains are inadvertently incentivized to aggressively target veterans for enrollment. The 1992 Federal Higher Education Act's 90-10 rule stipulates that for-profit education businesses must secure at least 10% of its revenue from sources other than federal student aid. The goal is to ensure federal funds are not used to prop up otherwise failing for-profit institutions that are unable to attract a minimum amount of revenue from the private market. As the U.S. Supreme Court explained in Cleveland v. National College of Business when upholding this rule's precursor, it is a, quote, device intended by Congress to allow the free market mechanism to operate and weed out those institutions which would survive only by the heavy influx of federal payments, and a way of protecting students by allowing the free market mechanism to operate. Now there is a loophole. When the law was written, there was no robust war and no robust GI Bill in place, and congressional authors simply overlooked the GI Bill as a form of federal student aid. Today, as you all know, billions of dollars every single year is sent to institutions of higher education from the VA and from the Department of Defense for veterans due to the post-9/11 GI Bill and vocational rehabilitation, which was created starting 15 years after this regulation was passed. Today, there exists support for all across the nation to permanently close the 90-10 loophole. Just 2 days ago, the Maryland General Assembly heard testimony on legislation to close the 90-10 loophole with bipartisan and bicameral support and a combined 39 co-sponsors. Even DeVry University committed to voluntarily closing the 90-10 loophole for all of their campuses. Closing the 90-10 loophole is about ending a practice that harms veterans, minorities, low-income students, and ensuring that those veterans are no longer targeted by failing institutions for the key role they play in exploiting this loophole.
Sir, I have 3 legislators here to testify on the legislation. I would just ask for you to maybe just, if you could summarize, or if we wouldn't mind, because I know they've got busy committee, would it be all right if we brought them up? Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you want to come back and finish your testimony. Okay, all right.
I was taking the analyst advice and trying to keep it nice and perfect. We want to hear from
I
you.
really appreciate your understanding on that. So, all right, we have 2 state representatives and a state senator here to testify. If you want to please come on forward, identify yourself for the record. We've got a busy room today, gentlemen, so I know that trying to cut Senator Manning off is obviously sometimes difficult.
Chair, I will defer over to Representative Will Need to kind of kick us off.
All right. Chair Wagner, Vice Chair Thompson, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Marty Wilde, and I'm the state representative from House District 11, which will probably be known as the Barnhart seat for the next 18 years, even if I hold that one. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 1544. By way of background, I've served in the military, active and reserve, for the last 25 years, but the views I express today are not necessarily those of the Department of Defense or the Department of the Air Force. You know, when coming off active duty, service members frequently enter a training program of one kind or another and often receive lots of marketing enticing them to apply to different programs. I certainly did. Since service members are not actually there yet, they're still on active duty generally, it's really hard for them to evaluate the quality and validity of the programs, and it's important to have some consumer protections in place. Unfortunately, there have been some bad actors who use predatory marketing to take advantage of veterans' GI Bill benefits, which ultimately lead them to ending up with a degree or certificate that isn't particularly useful and doesn't help them pay back any debt they might incur. Senate Bill 1544 simply requires that private, for-profit schools receive at least 10% of their tuition revenue from non-government sources. This bill is not intended to target any particular school. It targets a practice. Senate Bill 1544 only impacts schools that are exploiting the 90-10 loophole, schools that are more than 90% reliant on taxpayer dollars to operate and fail to offer enough quality to attract employer support or private paying students. Furthermore, the bill includes exclusionary clauses to ensure that only institutions subject to the new regulations are the ones that have the ability to exploit the 90-10 loophole. I hope the bill earns your support.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative. Greetings.
Thank you, Chair Wagner. Members of the committee, for the record, I'm Paul Evans. I represent House District 20. And of the three of us, I served only 20 years in the military. The folks who served to my side, they served longer. I'm going to give just a little bit of color. There are going to be people much smarter than me going into the details of the bill. I look at this, quite frankly, as a necessity because, quite frankly, since before the Civil War, some folks have tried to profiteer off of the military and off of veterans, whether it was hardtack that was inedible, whether it was brown paper that was used to make boots that weren't actually boots, whether it was guns that didn't fire. Whenever the government puts money into something, 90% of the people are doing the great work with it, but there's always 10% that try to take advantage. And right now we have the most battle-tested / exhausted military we've ever had in American history, 19 years of war. The one thing you cannot is allow anywhere at any time for the folks that come off active duty after they've stood up when so many didn't stand up to not have security knowing that their GI Bill is going to be used appropriately, and to know that when they go to a college, they go to a university, they go to a place of training, they're actually going to graduate with something that is usable to get them into a real career, that they're not being exploited in a shoddy, fly-by-night organization that's only going to end up without the money that they thought they would have, without a degree, without a program, or without a job. I believe at the end of the day that it is our responsibility to do what we can to ensure that we protect our veterans that are coming back, and I urge passage of this bill with every ounce of my enthusiasm. Thank you for the opportunity.
Representative. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to come before your committee in support of Senate Bill 1544. I will be as brief as possible, but this bill does require a little bit of acknowledgement of some bad practices, as been previously stated by my colleagues here. I'm currently in the process, as you know, working on my doctorate, and this is one of the issues that I have been studying and researching extensively. I've also took the time to read some of the online testimony, and there is a lot of disinformation that's already circulating as to the intent of this bill. This bill is not to deprive any school of offering degree programs to veterans, but it is designed to offer accountability for those dollars that are being exploited. For example, the University of Phoenix just recently had to pay back millions of dollars for programs that they were using that short-funded veterans and active duty service members. The practice that my colleagues have spoken about is costly and is unjustly and is doing detrimental harm to a lot of veterans. This is a good bill, and what it does is that it provides for the head to create rulemaking opportunities so that we can safeguard those dollars. Earlier today, we were into a committee where we were talking about education, the burden of carrying on debt and things like that. Well, can you imagine getting a degree and find out it's worthless? Well, I'm hoping that this point is taken as it is, and that it is not designed to prevent any veteran or active duty or their family members from going to any school, but it is designed to protect veterans and their dollars. And with that, subject to any of your questions.
Any questions? Thank you so much for your passionate advocacy and for your service.
Oh, by the way, Senator James Manning, Senate District 7.
Did I not do that? Did I not come in over the top? Oh, you did that on purpose. Yeah. Thank you, Senator. And Mr. Willis and Mr. LaVox. And actually, Mr. Curtis, would you like to finish? I know that I kind of pulled you off a little bit before.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
One thing I think would be helpful for the committee is maybe summarize the goal of the bill here. I don't think we've had it put in perspective what the problem is that we're trying to fix here, and I don't think we've got that yet.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I know you weren't complete.
And that was ultimately the end of it. As you know, states cannot regulate federal funds. However, states have the authority and the right to regulate licenses for companies in higher education institutions that seek to operate and enroll students in their state. In order to close the 90-10 loophole for Oregonians, this bill will ask Higher Education Coordinating Commission to implement increased regulation to ensure that institutions that are submitting financial reports and their applications to be reauthorized and receive their license again must show that they are receiving no more than 90% of their revenues from federal student aid sources. Ergo, 10% has to come from legitimate private sources. Otherwise, they will be subject to the pecuniary measures laid out with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. And it's a simple, clear cut. They're already submitting this information to the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. It'll just be a matter of identifying, how much of the revenue from tuition is coming from federal student aid sources, to include Title IV, GI Bill, Department of Defense, so vocational rehabilitation, foster children, former foster children sources as well. Anything that comes from a taxpayer source at the federal level will now, instead of being some of it counted as private source, for the state of Oregon will all be counted as federal dollars. That way the 10% side is a legitimate measure of how much of the private market is paying for the product that they are offering.
Question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2011, I sponsored a bill that passed that gave free university tuition to the spouses of fallen GIs and their kids. And so I have a soft spot for this issue, and I appreciate the intent. I just was wondering if you could explain why this approach, the 90-10, and you call it a loophole, why not something punitive if we find out that something, if people have been ripping off vets, why was this seen as the best approach?
This is an approach to solve an existing solution that doesn't go away with trying to investigate institutions and see how they're treating veterans or look at outcomes. We have multiple sources of looking at the outcomes and looking at these measures. This is an important closure of a loophole at the federal level that currently incentivizes institutions to target veterans. And so it's not just a matter of they don't have to count it as the 90%. The focus is that it lies in the 10%, which becomes the measurement of how much they can get from the federal government. One veteran maxing out their GI Bill of $20,000 at a single institution like this allows them to get an additional $180,000 in Title IV funds. 5 veterans is nearly $1 million, and that's just in 1 year. The incentive is, impossible to deny, and it creates this environment where we aren't just targets because we have quick and easy access to our own GI Bill, but because that GI Bill acts as a multiplier, and therefore we become this golden goose for these institutions. By closing the 90-10 loophole, it removes that incentive. It doesn't stop anyone from, as the senators and representatives mentioned, from enrolling veterans. It just disallows them from using veterans' money to inflate the number that is used by the federal government to decide how much Title IV funds, which makes up to 90% of their revenue, how much Title IV funds they can legally have access to.
Clarification. Yeah. I think I know the answer to this, but why just career schools and why not private schools, public schools?
Well, first of all, private nonprofit schools and public schools aren't subject to the 90-10 rule, so the incentive doesn't exist for them in the first place. And secondly, there are guardrails and regulations that each of those sectors are held accountable to, whether it's through the IRS, whether it's through the state, and especially public schools. All of them have comparatively an insane amount of regulation that they have to abide by in order to continue to operate. This is the one sector that has very, very limited, and it's because it's in the private market, and I do understand that that's important, that we aren't trying to overregulate the private market, but it is unique in its sense that the boards of private for-profit schools have a fiduciary incentive and a duty to increase profits, whereas for private nonprofits, it is literally the opposite.
very much. Thank you.
Okay. And we also have two folks here from HEC who can provide a little bit of technical assistance on that. But I definitely want to turn it over to these fine gentlemen to give us your perspective on the legislation as well.
Thank you for allowing us to testify today before the committees. Chair Senator Wagner and Senator Haas, Senator Thomas and Senator Giesler, and LPR, and the analyst. My name is Jack Fox, and I'm a disabled Vietnam veteran. And on behalf, I'm also the legislative chair for the American Legion Department of Oregon. And on behalf of the American Legion Department of Oregon, I'm in support of Senate Bill 50. In fact, the whole department is in support of Senate Bill 1544 relating to regulation of post-secondary institutions of education. This bill would protect veterans' hard-earned GI Bill benefits by forcing colleges to close the 90-10 loophole. Veterans and military service organizations nationwide are calling for the closure of the 90-10 loophole. By exploiting this loophole, for-profit colleges count GI Bill benefits as private funds, offsetting the 90% cap they otherwise face on their access to federal student aid. An accounting practice that nearly 24 state attorneys generals have said violates the intent of the law. Excuse me. As Holly Petraeus has written, the 90-10 loophole gives for-profit colleges an incentive to see service members as nothing more than dollar signs in uniform, and to use aggressive marketing to draw them in. In December, a U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs internal audit highlighted 4 private schools' deceptive advertising campaigns used to recruit veterans and warned that the government will waste $2.3 billion over the next 5 years if changes are not made to real Indian use. Taxpayers also suffer. According to the U.S. Education Department, hundreds of for-profit schools are almost entirely dependent on federal revenue. And if the 90-10 loophole were closed, they would be in violation of the federal cap. Taxpayers, in other words, are propping up otherwise failing schools. For-profit colleges can change this practice by improving their education and appealing to employers, as Defy Youth demonstrated when it voluntarily closed the 90-10 loopholes and reduced its overall reliance on federal student aid. We support Senate Bill 1544, and we look forward to seeing it pass into law.
And Mr. Wills, if we could, I've got 14 people on this bill, and then we have a whole nother bill that we have to do.
Right.
We certainly could accept your written testimony, or if you want to give us 1 minute on your passion behind the legislation, we would certainly appreciate your voice on the record.
Well, thank you, Chair Wagner, members of the committee. Here we go. My name is Jim Willis. I'm a resident of Lebanon, Oregon. I'm the elected alternate National Executive Committee man for the American Legion. The National Executive Committee is the ruling body at the national level for the American Legion. So I'm going to skip the rest of my testimony and go directly to the whereas, or excuse me, the resolve clause of the resolution that we passed at the national level in October of 2019. And it says that the American Legion encourages legislation and federal agency action to ensure better quality and student outcomes for institutions approved for use of Department of Veterans Affairs education benefits by adding Department of Defense and VA funds to the Title IV revenue sources 90-10 calculation as defined by Section 487A of the Higher Education Act. So it goes not only to the federal government, but it goes across the nation to state legislatures to take this action, at which they are doing in many, many other states. So obviously at the national level, and certainly as you heard from Jack LeBox at the state level, the American Legion, the largest wartime veterans organization in the nation, strongly supports Senate Bill 1544.
Thank you so much.
Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. It means a lot, and for your service. Questions? All right. Thank you so much for your panel. We do have, just to clarify, some of the legislative kind of workings. Kyle, do you and Sean want to come up and give us a little bit about how this operationalizes and anything on the amendment? But again, I know it'll be brief, and I still have 12 more people after you to slot in, so.
Thank you, Chair Wagner, members of the committee. Kyle Thomas, Director of Legislative and Policy Affairs for the HEC. I'm here today with Sean Pollack, who's the Program Administrator for our private post-secondary office. We are the regulatory authorizing and licensing body for private for-profit career schools and private degree granting institutions. The work that we do in this area is pretty extensive. We ensure schools are financially viable. We scrutinize the qualifications of administrators and teachers. We ensure they have robust academic policies. We inspect facilities, maintain curricular standards. It's a significant volume of our work that we don't usually talk about here in this building. The majority of the schools that are in this sector are law-abiding and do try to do what is best for their students. At the same time, particularly during economic downturns, when out-of-work adults return to school, very large institutions often attempt to capitalize on the influx of federal aid dollars that are available. This bill seeks to restrict institutions from aggressively recruiting veteran students by ensuring that Veterans Education Aid and other education aid, such as the Pell Grant, cannot total greater than 90% of a school's gross tuition revenue. If passed, the bill would establish a standard that is different in Oregon than exists federally, because as you've heard under federal rules, institutions cannot rely on federal aid for more than 90% of tuition revenue, but federal Veterans Education Aid is excluded. This is big business. These are big dollars. During the 2009 to 2017 recession, post-recession period, just 8 extraordinarily large for-profit institutions captured $34 billion in these federal benefits, while the majority of them came under fire and faced litigation for aggressive recruiting practices and undeliverable promises. Right now in Oregon, we don't believe there are a significant number of schools that would be affected by these proposed requirements. However, we think that the risk of non-compliance increases as the economy changes. To the extent that the legislature wants to develop a state standard for capping the amount of federal educational aid that can be used by an institution, we would recommend that that standard also include federal veterans education benefits, because fundamentally the HEC does not view that there is a difference between general ed aid and veterans educational aid. They're federal dollars that are available for generally the same purposes. As with regard to the HEC costs, we propose that there is a limited duration position requirement to create forms, draft rules, and work with schools to assist them in understanding and becoming compliant with the new requirements. This office receives no state general fund support today, and if passed without any funding attached, a fee increase may be required for us to acquire the staff that is needed to implement the bill. With that, I turn it to Sean for any additional comments or questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Kyle. Chair Wagner and members of the committee, I fully support all of Kyle's remarks, and not to introduce a new issue, but I would just underline that there are about 30 private career schools, that is trade schools, that we believe would be affected by this change, and perhaps 8 or 9 degree granting schools in the state. But this bill, as written, as I understand it, does nothing or has no effect upon schools that are located outside the state's borders, but are offering degrees and credits online to Oregonians. That might include about 47 degree granting institutions that are offering, that are authorized by my office, the Office of Degree Authorization, perhaps 2,000 degree granting institutions that operate under the auspices of SARA, the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement. Many of those are for-profit, maybe not a majority, but a minority of those are for-profit, so this would not affect those. But this would require us to impose another level of scrutiny upon institutions within the state.
Questions from that? All right, thank you so much for your testimony. I appreciate it. Again, we have several folks We had 20 minutes on the advocacy vote yes side. We've got probably a dozen people signed up, and we have to move on to give equal time for folks. I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to keep a hard limit on 2 minutes per person testifying. We'll start with Jeffrey E-N-G-H, Eng, and along with Dawn Morton. I'm trying on the handwriting. Sometimes it's, and if there's someone you'd like to bring up with you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And we do have a lot of written testimony. If your testimony is submitted on OLIS, you can find it as part of the public record. I will also tell folks here today that we're not work sessioning, which means we're not moving the bill today. But if you could summarize your thoughts, and we can hear as many voices as we can from folks that want to provide their voices on the record.
And thank you for accepting the written testimony, Chair Wagner, Senator Haas, and Senator Thompson and Gelser. I'm Jeff Eng, and I've been working with career colleges and education here in the state now for over 11 years. My role has been as the state director of the Northwest Career College Federation and as an advocate working on regulatory and legislative issues in the past. I think one thing that needs to be brought before the committee's attention is that the state, through the HEC and the private career schools division back in 2014 and 2015, saw the horror stories of what you've seen here today, of veterans who have been abused by schools that have taken their education dollars and not delivered. As a result with that, we established a advocacy with the HEC through Juan Baez Olivero. In fact, in 2015, I was able to actually testify in favor of tightening the rules that have governed the private career schools, and particularly those that are for-profit schools that are publicly traded on Wall Street. At that time, we had Corinthian colleges, ITT, that were in crash and burn mode. The schools came together with the HEC to actually create further information available to students and limit the ability for these schools that are out of state for coming in and creating issues for these students. That was very successful. If you go through written testimony, every school that is listed as having a complaint no longer operates in the state of Oregon. This was guaranteed through the surety bonds, requiring that all schools protect tuition here in the state, as well as moving statute rules that are regulations that were in statute to rule so that the HEC could respond in a very timely and thorough way very rapidly with that. If you look at Mr. Raymond's testimony that he's submitted online, it's the perfect justification for that, because every one of those schools are no longer in Oregon. My problem with the rule is the statute that we see here today is that the definitions are really the problem, I think, for a lot of schools. The definition, particularly of the institutional loan, is written in such a way that it doesn't really understand current Oregon rule. Oregon rule requires that schools disclose the full cost of tuition. So basically the wording in this bill would require that any student who is required to sign an enrollment agreement and a disclosure agreement would automatically put those funds, regardless if it came from out-of-pocket, gift, and funds that the Supreme Court did not identify as legitimate sources, into the federal calculation. That's a problem. The other aspect of this bill is it paints with a really wide brush. Predatory for-profit schools. It doesn't make a designation that if you're a good school or you're not, you're a for-profit school, you are predatory. And I'm going to speak for these two folks here today, Anna Marie Lopez, who is from Carrington College, and Don Mutos, who is from Pioneer Pacific and Oregon Culinary Institute. Some things you need to know about these schools. Carrington College is regionally accredited by the Accrediting Commission of Community and Junior Colleges. It is a for-profit school in Oregon. It was just literally granted last month a 7-year accreditation from the same organization that accredits community colleges and junior colleges. In addition to that, it was given 2 accommodations in the highest level of accreditation possible from this organization. But yet, in this bill, they're identified as a predatory for-profit education, not because of the quality of education they supply, but because their tax status. To my right, Pioneer Pacific and Oregon Culinary Institute. 54 veterans currently attend Oregon Culinary Institute.
And I don't know if there's an opportunity. We're going on about 4 minutes on.
Yeah, 4 minutes?
Okay. Do you want to yield your time? Okay. This isn't Congress, but if you do want to yield the balance of your time, that would help us to be able to hear the other 10 people signed up to testify, given our time parameters. So.
54 veterans currently attend the Oregon Culinary Institute. Again, if the language that we have moving all funds that are provided by veterans towards the cost of their education move within that 90% calculation, I think it's going to have more severe effect than what even Sean or anybody has felt. We don't know what that number is yet in that calculation. The time frame has not provided us the opportunity to pull it all together to see. But if indeed what we think may happen happens, is that Oregon Culinary Institute, the premier culinary school here in Oregon in the region, with a 93% placement rate of their graduates in their field of study, may have to limit or get out of the education of veterans altogether. I think we all agree that veterans have high priority for protection here in the state. I think the problem with this bill is that the wording is such in a way that it's going to be hurting the people who are the good players as well as the bad players. And I think the intent of the bill is great, and I think these guys agree with me on this. But I think the problem is it paints with a really wide brush that's going to have ramifications we don't even realize.
Would you like to say 2 seconds on the record, or just identify yourself?
Thank you, Senator Wagner and the chair. I just want to thank you for allowing us to be here today, and I'm just here to answer questions if you want any other information about Carrington College.
Okay, excellent. And if you want to just identify yourself, then just say that you're supporting. That helps us as part of the public record as well.
Lopez, I'm from Carrington College, and I am here for support.
Thank you so much.
Pioneer Pacific College and Oregon Culinary Institute. Ultimately, this bill is trying to protect students from schools that no longer exist in Oregon, the University of Phoenix, the ITT, the Corinthians. And it will force us as a culinary school to reject veterans that come to us for a professional level education. And I don't want to see that happen, because we have many graduates and over 600 properties around the country that they can go to work.
Okay. Appreciate your testimony, and I just wanted to clarify as well that you're in support of opposition to the bill. Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony. Okay.
Thank you.
We have 8 more people, which at 2 minutes apiece, we're going to be able to get folks through. So Wayne, I'm not going to try, but I think you know who you are. And then come forward and you can give us your name on the record. And Kim and Dennis from Concord Career College. If you all wanted to join as a panel, if you do have written testimony that has been submitted as part of the record, we can reference that on our Oregon Legislative Information System, and then you can just give us a little bit about your perspective on the bill and how it impacts your own working relationship. That'd be great. And whoever wants to start. And Ms. Gazelter is going to keep me on track, so whoever would like to begin.
I will start. My name is Wayne Matlich. Chairman Wagner and committee, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak on this. I have submitted a position paper. I will just make 3 or 4 points.
Perfect.
And I shouldn't take more than 3 hours to do that.
Welcome to the legislature.
So first of all, who are all these people out here? They are passionate about post-secondary education. They're faculty, they're administrators, they're students, and there's a lot of veterans all attending or running private career schools. And we all share these brief comments that you'll hear. Private career schools have a culture that is very much like you'd see in the military. Veterans will tell you never leave a veteran behind. The culture in private career school is much different, and our goals and objectives are different than public schools. Our only measurement is completion and placement. How many students actually attain the goal that they came to us for? How many students graduated and were hired in the field of study that they started off to study? that only is the case in private career schools. So what is in place today that makes that possible? Well, we put in a lot of additional resources to help students get through the troublesome times and get toward that goal. We have departments and processes in place to catch students, give them extra tutoring, and just like the workplace, just like in a workplace, we get students that have complaints, including, and nobody is arguing that the complaints that are stated by the favorable side of this aren't anything but the truth.
Is there a final sentence or two that you think you could throw in here on top of your testimony? It looks like it's pretty impressive written record.
Well, let me do this. Why would a veteran choose private career school? I started many, many years ago as a infantry drill sergeant, so I know the type of training that the military has. And if you were to look at the list of MOSs, military occupational specialties, what do they look like? They don't look like the program list at a state university or college. They don't look like the program list at a community college. They do look very much like the list of programs available through our private career colleges. We are made very, very much. In fact, a lot of the veterans rehab are suggested to go to private career schools. So in short,
perfect.
There are some harmful things here. The intent of this bill is good. Mm-hmm. We think that the approach needs to be tuned, and the second part of it, dealing with the institutional loans, is sort of a curveball that has nothing to do with the 90-10, but would make extremely hard and difficult case for the private career colleges.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. And whoever would like to follow. And we are going to start it hard at 2 minutes, so yeah. And if your testimony is submitted, there's no need to just read it. You can just tell us a little bit about who you are, who you're representing, and why you feel the bill is problematic in your world. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chair Wagner, members of the committee. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I am Kim Urian, Campus President of Concord Career College in Portland. Concord has been in Portland for 50 plus years, and we currently train only in allied health careers. In the past 5 years, Concord has graduated over 2,000 students in allied health careers and have a nearly 80% verified placement rate of our graduates working in an allied health career of their chosen field. In addition to training the students and mentoring them in their chosen field, we do, as Wayne alluded to, a student services department that focuses on maintaining and enhancing a positive learning environment for all students, also helping them to overcome obstacles that they may encounter during their time here at school. Along with the graduate and student affairs department, so I'm reading really fast.
Yeah. There's no need, if your testimony submitted as part of the public record, there's no need to reread it. You can just tell us a little bit about, just summarize. We understand who you are and who you represent, and you can just give us a little bit about that final, this is why it's really important to you.
The reason why I feel it's really important, we do educate many students who otherwise could not go to a university or chose not to go to a university or four-year college, or they have gone and they chose to come back and get another associate degree or diploma and have a new career path for that. So it's very important that we can continue to educate and have the ability to be able to educate those students that want to come back and go to a vocational technical career school for them. And in closing, again, Concord opposes Senate Bill 1544 as written and look forward to continued conversation to ensure Oregon post-secondary education system is fair and accessible to ensure student success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Greetings.
Chair Wagner, committee members, thank you for your time. My name is Dennis Kelly. I will keep this as brief as I can.
We appreciate it.
And why this is important to me, I am a fourth generation veteran also. My wife is a disabled veteran. I have 2 sons serving in the service currently. And why this is important is I just feel that it puts an undue burden on veterans in this particular state that they don't have in other states, and hinders our students' access to quality education. You know, as Wayne had mentioned, the 2 big things that we look at is in our outcomes is graduation rate and placement. If I just take our 2 associate programs and look at those really quick, we have a placement rate of over 90%. I think it's over 93%. We work with every major healthcare provider in the Portland area. Just speaking as both a father and a veteran, I can tell you I don't go. I have a kid with a brain tumor. He's a brain tumor survivor. When I go and visit medical facilities, I see my graduates there every time I go.
Great. Thank you so much for your testimony, your passion on behalf of the issue. With that, I will excuse you. So we are going to turn and we are going to go really quickly to the next panel. Joseph Martin, should we take him straight down?
Yeah.
Ray, I'm going to do my best. Mola Mani and David Ballin. And again, if you want to just give us your name for the record, who you're representing. If you have written testimony, there's really no need to read it. We've got it right here in front of us. I do have to cut off the testimony here in about 5 minutes. We've got 2 more people coming in up after you. So if you want to just give us your name, give us a little bit about why you're so passionate about this issue, we'd really appreciate it. And whoever would like to begin.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Martin first.
Okay.
Senator Wagner, panel members, thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Joseph Martin. I'm a combat veteran. I'm a current student at the Institute of Technology, Salem, Oregon. I presented my testimony, so I'll just say a brief few words.
Great.
I understand there's some veterans that feel they are swindled by some of these secondary educational institutions. And yes, that's a problem, but do we need to be so drastic so as to limit our options and the benefits that we earned in choosing the school that we went to? I kind of liken it to buying a new car, buying a house, gaining new employment, or even joining the military. We need to ask the right questions, know what we're getting into, and read the fine print. It's nothing new. For instance, when I joined IoT, I understood how much the GI Bill would cover and what I would need to cover in the end. In my case, nothing. Perhaps we need to educate veterans in choosing their educators. It could be as simple as a mass email or even a workshop. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your testimony. I really appreciate it. Whoever would like to follow.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wagner and member of the committee. My name is Ramond. I'm a managing member for Aveda Institute Portland in Portland, downtown Portland. We are a cosmetology school. We're the only cosmetology school that allows VA benefits since 2008. Our veterans are less than 0.5% of our enrollment. They do not have choices. We're the only choice. And if it goes about quality of education, I think outcomes is the key. So if we really are judging the school, we should take a look at the outcomes. And I know in this sector, in the private career schools, we all have outcomes that we have to report, and we have to meet some minimums. And I think majority of the schools way surpass that. So that's readily available to everybody who can see and make a right choice to come into it. In our scenario, I think 90-10 is probably a little bit outdated performance. If it's based on a performance, there's other outcomes that you can measure rather than a 90-10 portion of it. I think we have independent students who want to open their own business and they want choices. And we as a career school give them those choices that they can do that. We do serve the underprivileged and low-income students, and majority of them are more. Title IV is very important to them. The ability to get those funds is very important to them. So it's important to recognize that and allow them that option to have that. In finishing, really, I do oppose the bill, and I think there's better ways around it to make sure we have quality education in Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time and sharing your concerns.
Thank you. My name is David Balin, Dean of Students at Sumner College. We're a medical arts program that offers medical assisting and nursing programs. Less than 2% of our revenue comes from veteran revenue funds. But I object to the implication that for-profit schools are necessarily predatory, which this bill states. I also object to the testimony that we're less regulated than private schools. We're highly regulated. We're regulated by HEC. We're regulated by the Oregon State Board of Nursing, and we're nationally accredited. So we're held to a high accountability. We have to have 70% completion rate. We have to have 70% placement rate, and we have to meet Oregon State Board of Nursing's NCLEX, which is the National Nursing Exam requirements. So we're very well regulated. I think we're very important to meeting the goals of, excuse me if it's 40-40-20, because there just aren't the seats without us. Our students are students who are on waitlisted at community colleges often. They could go to a community college, but there just aren't the seats there, so we fulfill a very important role. And I also think our return on investment for the students is demonstrable.
Great. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Last two folks we have, and again, we're going to keep it really, really limited, is Cliff Boyer. Looks like Nathan Dean, surgeon, retired. Yeah, okay. Did I get you close?
Yes.
I was trying to do the handwriting.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And again, tell us where you are, where you stand. That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Sure, mine will be extremely short because I thought I was signing a log saying I was here. But I would be remiss if I didn't say anything because I came all the way down here. I was supporting Oregon Culinary Institute. I spent over 20 years in the United States Air Force.
Just give us your name for the record as well.
Nathan Dean. Tech Sergeant, retired.
Thanks.
I spent over 20 years in the Air Force. Within that 20 years, I earned multiple degrees. 20 years in the military allows you to decide what you want to be when you grow up. So after leaving the military in 20 years, I wanted to open up my own restaurant. I went to Oregon Culinary Institute. It allowed me to get a degree that's been more helpful than any degree I earned while I was in the military. I'm an Astoria kid, spent over 20 years living outside of Oregon before coming back home. I got my degree there, and I got to come here to Salem and get a head chef job here in the city and beat out other people potentially for that job that have had more time in this career field. However, with my military experience and because I'm going to culinary school, which is a lot of military people are getting out. My sister-in-law from Texas, she got out, retired a year before me. She's a baker. She went to baking school. She's doing great down there, even though it's El Paso. I don't know why she wants to live down there.
And if there is any way you could summarize in one more sentence.
That's it.
Okay.
It's been extremely important to me and my career post-military.
Fantastic. Thank you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you so much for listening to us today on speaking about this topic. I have just two quick points to make. My name is Cliff Boyer. Perfect. I'm the Director of Student Services at the Institute of Technology here in Salem. And I have to say that the reality that this bill is trying to address does not match my daily reality. I have the privilege of witnessing lives changing for the better every day. Our student population right now, we have veterans are only 2%. We have 5 veterans honors in our student body right now, in our student population. And that's unusually high for us. What our student population is, 94% female, mostly single young mothers, half of them Hispanic or mixed race. Many of them have PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Many of them have exhausted the possibilities for themselves in the public school system, and we are their last chance. We fill a niche that is left empty by the public school system. And I just want to say once again that we are changing lives, and I would hate to see that hindered or interfered with in a way that is counterproductive to their possibilities and their dreams.
Seems like a nice capstone to the opposition position for the legislation. Is there any questions, committee members? Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who took your time to come here today to testify and share your opinions. With that, we're going to close public hearing on Senate Bill 1544, and we're going to open public hearing on Senate Bill 1572. And Ms. Gezelter, would you like to give us a brief overview? And then I'm going to turn it over to the distinguished senator to my left.
Chair Wagner, members of the committee, Senate Bill 1572 establishes statutory graduation requirements for the high school diploma, adding 3 credits of science, 3 credits of history, geography, economics, or civics, 1 credit of health, 1 credit of physical education, and 3 credits of either career and technical education, the arts, or a world language. To existing statutory requirements, the students take 3 credits of mathematics and 4 credits of English. The measure removes the authority of the State Board of Education to enact additional graduation requirements, requires the State Board to provide guidance to school districts on additional district graduation requirements, requires the State Board to recommend a process for school districts to issue diplomas retroactively to students who passed all required coursework but did not receive a diploma due to graduation requirements that no longer exist, applies to high school diplomas awarded on or after July 1st, 2021.
Thank you so much. Senator Haas, your one priority bill of this legislative session. Tell us.
Thank you. I will not go down to the stand, but Mark Haas from Senate District 14. And this bill, 1572, does remove the requirement that high school students pass the essential skills test in order to graduate. We have been working on this bill for the last year and a half or so, and we've had testimony in several legislative settings and education committees from educators and students telling us this test no longer serves its purpose. In fact, we heard from several young people who were forced to delay their graduation to compete the test, people who later went on to lead successful lives in business and in college despite this drawback for them. It does not reduce the academic rigor of earning a diploma. It's just repealing what I believe is a relic that no longer works. It leaves intact graduation requirements that are among the highest in the country, and it leaves intact local school districts' ability to add graduation requirements. The essential skills test only serves to harm the students who failed them. The exams do not produce any claimed benefits for those who pass. There is absolutely no evidence that I can find that students who pass these tests are more likely to succeed in college or career or anywhere else. And what bothers me a lot is that students that fail these tests report feeling defeated. They also report feeling unmotivated to retake the test or work on performance-based assessment, and sometimes they just never finish high school at all. And as we know, people in that category face a hard uphill battle without even a high school diploma. So that's essentially what this bill does. We have a couple of amendments. One is still in the drafting stage, and I know we have some people who want to talk about this. I would like to point the committee to a memorandum that was done by the Legislative Policy and Research Office that did an analysis of testimony from the Department of Education, and in fact, I think it was kind of a fact check, and I think it speaks for itself. There were some initial inaccuracies from the department that I think are a result of misunderstandings in the bill, and but it's in the record. It's on OLS. My testimony's on OLS, and everything's out in the open. So thank you.
Okay. And the Legislative Council opinion is also just been recently posted as well, just so you know.
Yes, the Legislative Council opinion contradicts a claim made by the Department of Education. So.
Okay, fantastic. We do have 6 people signed up, testimony in favor. And again, if we stick to 2 minutes, and I know I've recognized some of your names and faces from previous iterations of this legislation, you want to come and give us a little bit brief. I also see that there's submitted public testimony on OLS that people can reference. So we're going to go ahead and take folks. You want to start from the bottom up? We're going to get to them all. Why don't I just go straight down? Nick Highfill, Larry Lewin, and Colleen Hunter. And we're going to set a 2-minute here. And so again, if you've submitted written testimony, no need to reread it. Just give us your name, tell us why you're passionate about this, and we'll reference your written material. And I know that I recognize some familiar faces from previous committee hearings on this legislation as well. So whoever would like to begin.
We're going to let Larry start this off.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a retired teacher from Eugene.
Can you give us your name on the record as well?
Yes, sorry. Larry Lewin, Lewin, retired Eugene 4J school teacher, member of OPEN, the Oregon Public Education Network. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this. I submitted my testimony electronically to OLS. I'll summarize quickly. Senator Haas just talked about that feeling of being defeated as a high school student, not being able to pass one of these graduation requirements. I volunteered in a high school in Eugene in an essential skills course. I worked with some students, mainly Latina students, trying to pass this requirement. They already seemed defeated. And they knew if they didn't pass, no graduation, couldn't walk with their classmates, no diploma. And they had already passed their English classes. This was an additional burden. So I've experienced firsthand. I agree with you, Senator.
Great. Thank you so much for your testimony.
For the record, my name is Nick Highfill, and last year I graduated high school not as a senior but a super senior due to the essential skills graduation requirements holding me back. Since the 6th grade, I was unable to pass my math and English Oregon's standardized tests, and I was unable to pass these tests throughout middle school and high school. My senior year rolled around. I did pass my reading test, but did not pass my math test. So I was given all of the wonderful alternatives to the math test and failed all of them. So that resulted in me rolling into the next year as a super senior, watching all my friends graduate, me sitting back on the bleachers. Hey, well, congratulations, Anyhow, since my freshman year, I had a passion for creating videos and was known as a school video guy, making films for my high school. So not graduating as a senior and rolling into the next year, I had all this extra time because I had all my classes complete. With that free time, I started my own media production business, and we're now serving clients across the globe and across to Oregon, telling their stories through photo and video. And I find that it's pretty crazy how in high school I started my own business. I was working with a team of people, managing them, and flying across the world doing my dream job. I just find that pretty crazy that I couldn't receive a diploma, but I could start my own business. Mind-boggling. Here's the thing. I believe that the essential skills graduation requirements that were voted in is a huge mistake in the Oregon school system. You take a student like me that cares about his education and tries his hardest only to be held back from graduating. I think standardized testing needs to be taken out of the school system because it serves no purpose. I've heard before that the test was used to test the student's knowledge, if they're proficient in these subjects, and I find that for me, it was taking me up to a week to complete these tests in school, and taking myself out of a learning environment like the classroom was a complete waste of time. So after my 5th year in high school, I did receive my diploma, but I'm worried about all the students that aren't going to receive their diplomas due to these strict requirements. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you for your persistence in completing your high school education, too. Greetings.
For letting me speak, and Senator Wagner and Haas for your efforts on behalf. I'm speaking today as a 38-year-old public school teacher who retired earlier than I had planned to due to the effects of standardized assessments on students K through 12. Colleen Hunter.
Thank you.
Member of Community Alliance for Public Education. These tests drastically changed public school for students and teachers in devastating ways. My last 12 years teaching 4th grade students, I administered both the OAKS and the Smarter Balanced assessments. Time and money wasted on these activities greatly impacted the focus of curriculum, available resources, and the process of teaching and learning. These effects on students and their lives were so drastic that I could no longer in good conscience do my job. I wanted to apologize to my students, but couldn't. At 4th grade, the expectations for students were 2 to 4 years above their developmental level. These tests were rolled out with expected passing rates of only 40 to 45%. Many students have not been successful in passing this test given in grades 3 through 8 and 11th. This has been their reality year after year. Sadly, Oregon's public high school graduation rate is one of the lowest in the country, as well as the percentage of high school students who are able to finish in 4 years. I feel the required essential skills assessments have a great deal to do with them dropping out before graduation or taking longer than 4 years. Knowing that there's another hurdle to clear can be very self-defeating to students who have had difficulties with state assessments throughout their school time. If high school students are successful in completing all classes and earning the number of required units with passing grades, they should be allowed to graduate. They've proven competence in math, reading, and writing by earning passing grades in these classes. As a veteran public school teacher, mother of 2 graduates of Oregon Public Schools, actively involved in advocating for all students, I would urge you all to support the passage of Senate Bill 1572, giving school districts in Oregon the power to establish the use of essential skills assessments or requirements as they choose. Thank you so very much for the opportunity.
Boom. That was great. All right. Thank you so much for your testimony. All right. We've got Jim Torrey, Kathleen Jeske, and Jared Mason-Gear. And whoever would like to begin, it's nice to see you. Mr. Mayor.
I'll go with the oldest.
And most distinguished.
My name is Jim Torrey. I'm currently serving my 13th year on the Eugene 4J School Board. And I want to tell you that I'm here to support the elimination of the essential skills test. These tests negatively impact our most vulnerable, underserved students. It also increases testing time, which we have too much of anyway. An example, and this is from a mother of a young man who is on an individual education plan, struggling to make sure her son gets a diploma. Algebra 1 is a requirement. But in addition to Algebra 1 and math, the next two math classes are harder than Algebra 1. Understand what happens when this student is expected, who is having tutoring almost constantly, is expected to be able to pass this essential skills test at the end of his senior year. Credit recovery limits that these students have to go through if they fail, and by the way, 25% of our freshmen fail Algebra 1. So now they have to take it again because they have to pass that. Credit recovery limits access to relevant electives that students want to take. The dropout rate in our district is heaviest at the end of the sophomore year. Why is that? They come to the point, I'm not going to be able to get the credits I need, and I'm not going to be able to pass this test anyway. And by the way, I now have my driver's license, so I'm off. I suggest that we ask the State Board of Education to provide curriculum examples for math and literacy that will allow the math test to be done. Can I just jump this one thing? Our goal, provide multiple pathways to student success, including instructional and career pathways to engage all students for postgraduate readiness. The Eugene School Board unanimously voted in support of this last night.
Great, thank you, Director Torrey. Mr. Meisinger? Oh, actually, I'm going straight down. Sorry, I'm pivoting. Okay. I'm sorry. Getting ahead of myself.
I'm just squeezed in here.
No, please do.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you. I'm Kathleen Jeske. I'm from Canby. I was a teacher for 30 years, mostly in classes of English learners, and I just retired 2 years ago. And thank you, Senator Wagner and Co-Chair Thompson and committee for hearing our testimony today. I submitted written testimony, and I'm not going to really go over that again. There's a lot of links in there to studies and articles referencing why this is an idea that was tried and has failed. And I'd just like to, thank you for your statements, because I was going to sort of address some of the same issues. This year, I've had two parents of former students contact me. Both of these students are on IEPs. One of these students is a dual identified student. He is a special education and a talented and gifted student with a learning disability in the area of reading. Both of these parents have decided, because their children are very discouraged. These are the perfect example of just what Nick was talking about, who was up here a moment ago. These kids, starting when they were in 6th grade in my class, were unable to pass the standardized tests because of their learning disabilities. They also, at that time, were still in the English learner category. Both their parents contacted me this year and said, what do you think about online school? What do you think about alternatives to high school here in Canby? My son does not want to go to school anymore. And as a matter of fact, today, as I was in the Capitol, I got yet another text from a teacher who I was a partner with asking me that very same question for another student, all in 10th grade, just as you stated, coincidentally. There have been unintended consequences to this, and I would urge you to get rid of the exams.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Wagner, members of the committee. For the record, Jared Mason here, representing the Oregon Education Association and roughly 45,000 educators across the state. Briefly, first, I would just express appreciation to Senator Haas and Senator Wagner for the persistence and ongoing work on this topic. I really do believe that we would have passed legislation last session doing away with essential skills were it not just for the kind of complicated nature of the flow of committees last session and the amount of emphasis that was on a number of other important education topics. I think if we had had a little bit more time to dig into this, we would have successfully passed this bill in that session. And I think we do have an opportunity to really write this, what is, I think, getting to be an increasingly viewed as a real error by previous legislatures in enacting essential skills. I think the three main things you've heard a lot about the impact on individual students that this has and really talented individuals who are being held back from being able to reach their full potential. We also think it does the state a real disservice in, I would argue, artificially suppressing graduation rates by imposing this impediment that if we were more reliant just on the clear demonstration of the skills we really care about, you would see a lot more students graduating out of our schools, and I think we would all feel better about our education system. So I think this is a really important piece of legislation. I'm glad that you're taking it up, and hopefully we can move it forward this session. Thanks for the work.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Very appreciated. Last person we have for the day, our Assistant Superintendent, Associate Superintendent of Public Instruction, Colt Gill. What's that? Deputy? I always forget the title. When we made the change in the state constitution and the superintendent's the governor and all of that. My apologies for the title. The Grand Poobah of Public Education in the state of Oregon. Mr. Gill, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Senator Wagner, Chair, and members of the committee. I am Colt Gill, Director of the Oregon Department of Education is what I typically go by because the other one is so complex. Thanks for your time to make a few comments regarding Senate Bill 1572. I do want to be clear at the outset, expressing my opinion and that my commitment, and the commitment of the department to work with you all in the legislature. The larger policy considerations of the bill reflects such as moving authority from the state to each individual school district to define graduation requirements is a matter that the legislature clearly has authority to decide. So it's not the role of the department. But in consideration of your decision-making on this bill, I feel it's important to convey a little bit of information. So I previously submitted testimony. I don't plan to read that to you, but if you can give me time, I would like to share 3 points. And some of these may be in contrast to what the recent information that you just posted. I haven't had an opportunity, nor has our legal team had an opportunity to review that. So first, for us, this bill appears to reduce the rigor of the Oregon diploma. It removes some of the rigor of the current credit requirements, and it removes all of the requirements beyond credit requirements. So these include clearly the demonstration of proficiency in essential skills, the essential skills of reading and comprehending a variety of texts, writing clearly and accurately, and applying mathematics in a variety of settings. Second, in developing an education plan and profile beginning in the 7th grade that develops a path to graduation as well as graduation planning after. So what students plan to do after their graduation. Completing an extended application of their knowledge and skills in the context of a student's personal and career interests and participation in career-related learning experiences. The bill directs the state board to develop recommendations for graduation requirements that are beyond those listed in the statute. However, a district is not required to implement the recommendations and may decide to require only units of credit for graduation. This part's important. The bill may also impact the state's board's ability to define a credit. This has implications for rigor, of course. Under current law, the state board has adopted an administrative rule that requires districts to grant credit where the student has demonstrated defined levels of proficiency or mastery of recognized standards through a variety of pathways. The rule was adopted under the state board's general grant authority given under ORS 326051. However, it is not clear to us whether the state board would still have authority to define a credit if the diploma requirements are vested solely at the district level.
Hey, Cole, I don't mean to interrupt. Can I ask a question, clarifying question on that? Or if you want to, what would we need to do in order to clarify that in statute, to make sure that you and the board still have that authority. Isn't there something that we could do in statute to make sure that that's not any area, that there's any gray area of confusion on that? So that through the administrative rulemaking process, you could make sure that you're still able to retain that, but not require the essential skills is what the intention of the bill is.
Absolutely. So Chair Wagner, yes, you could, in the statute, you could define that the state board
we could
has
fix that.
authority
We
to-
could work with you on fixing that. Perfect. Okay. So you're speaking to the bill, but not to the ability for us to fix the bill to accomplish both ends.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Sorry,
So just
didn't mean to
finish
lose
that
your
point.
flow. I
Yeah,
know
no,
it's been a
that's okay.
busy
Just
day.
finish that point.
Yeah.
If the bill does afford districts the ability to define a credit, then one possible consequence would be lack of standardization for what it takes to earn a credit from school to school, district to district. Second point, under the Every Student Succeeds Act, and this is related again to that credit definition for the most part, states are required to track the 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate. This is the ACGR. The ACGR formula calculates graduation using the state's regular high school diploma, which is defined as a standard high school diploma awarded to the preponderance of students in a state that is fully aligned with the state standards. By vesting the authority to establish the graduation requirements at the school district level, and thereby allowing more discretion by districts to establish a different minimum graduation requirement, it becomes more difficult to determine a state standard and ensure that Oregon's ACGR calculation meets the requirements of federal law. The current legislation may not per se be in violation of ESSA, but it makes it more difficult to establish a uniform statewide diploma standard and puts Oregon at greater risk of running afoul of ESSA requirements. The credit issue that I raised earlier also has implications here. If the state has not clearly defined how a credit is earned, we could have a difficult time saying that the preponderance of students across the state are earning a diploma that aligns to a state standard if the state standard is based solely on units of credit.
And Director Gill, before we do move off that one point, I do want to turn over to Senator Haas.
Well,
for
I was just
clarification
going
on
to,
ESSA.
we did get the committee asked for an opinion from the Legislative Council on that point with ESSA, and you've probably seen this by now, but we do not agree that SB 1572 causes a conflict with ESSA. So that's an OLS, it's on the record, so we'll have to agree to disagree on that point. But there's not a conflict there.
Chair
According to our lawyers.
Members of the committee, yeah, members of the committee, Senator Haas. Yeah, I have not been able to review that, and clearly our legal team hasn't been able to review that in this short timeline. I do think that my initial perusal sitting in the audience there was that it didn't address this ability for districts to name what it takes to create a credit, so therefore it didn't hit the entire question.
But again, through statute, we can make an amendment working with your office to make sure that we can thread that needle and that we're not in conflict with anything regarding federal law, because nobody here wants to make sure that we're in nonconformity.
Yes.
So, okay, so there's a way that
Chair
we could get
Wagner,
to
I
that
believe
language
I-
relatively quickly, I'm assuming.
I believe that's.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes. Okay, third point. So the lack of standardization could lead to a barrier for students who enter a new district during the high school years. So if they start in one high school on their graduation path, then they move to another high school, they may be set up to be following a separate and unique set of requirements from school district to school district. So statewide irregularity in graduation requirements could adversely impact mobile students and will impact the statewide currency or consistency of rigor of the Oregon diploma. If the diploma requirements look different from district to district, that can impact the ability of post-secondary institutions and employers' ability to interpret exactly what an Oregon diploma signifies in terms of skills and knowledge. And then finally, I just want to comment because I did receive a request from Senator Haas and other legislators. So I want to put that out there that on May 30th, 2019, I received this letter from Senator Haas, Senator Roblin, and Representative Smith Warner. The letter requested that I convene a group of stakeholders to review OAR 581-022-2115 to address concerns around essential skill requirements for graduation, specifically to address issues around students' accessibility to alternative assessments. I responded to the letter and agreed to undertake the convening. Those are both on the record as well. Neither correspondent set a date for this action. Subsequent to the request, the legislature passed the Student Success Act, and Governor Brown signed that act into law. My attention and efforts have necessarily been focused on the implementation of the Student Success Act over the months since its passage. I do intend to follow through on the legislators' request as soon as my attention can be shifted from initial implementation of the Student Success Act. And in the meantime, students are provided access to multiple alternative assessments, along with many allowable accommodations and modifications to demonstrate a level of mastery for their essential skills. And I just want to put forward that we have heard from students today and in previous testimony who struggled to graduate on time because their districts didn't provide those multiple opportunities or supported alternatives and accommodations and modifications for them to reach that level of being able to demonstrate proficiency and graduate. I think that this practice is in contrast with the current requirements. We do now require districts to do that. If we shift authority for virtually all graduation requirements to individual school districts, my fear is that we may see a greater variance in how students are supported on their path to graduation.
I have to say, that's not what this legislation does. It does not do that. It does not shift. I mean, I would just challenge you and say, where in this legislation does it empower specifically, line by line, empower school districts to take on additional authority for graduation requirements? As folks know, it's nauseating. I chair a school board. We have an additional credit requirement in foreign language. I talked to Senator Dembro, who was on the State Board of Education back in 2008, and part of the narrative, and I haven't gone back to the record on this, was allowing school districts additional flexibility to be able to offer civics or work with a local business in order to show proficiency. It was to give additional flexibility to school districts to be able to do that work. If there's a core of subject matter knowledge that could be defined by the legislature, and the locus was then turned over, and actually they already have the legal ability to do it. School districts can work with their communities to identify what are additional opportunities. I'm trying to understand where in the bill specifically you're looking at this bill giving the authority to school districts more than what they have right now to establish that requirement. I understand variability, I understand the state's interest and the board's interest on wanting to have uniform standards, but I just can't find it.
Chair Wagner, our reading of the bill, page 1, lines 20 to 22, state that in order to receive a high school diploma from a school district or public charter school, a student must satisfy the requirements established by the school district or public charter school while in grades 9 through 12 and must complete the units, and that lists those credits. So that's the place where it shifts from the state board. It brackets out and removes the state board from authority, and then therefore puts the authority into the school district or public charter school.
It doesn't.
Well, I think Lisa has the authority on the reason for that switch.
Chair Wagner, members of the committee, it does bracket out the State Board of Education, but the school districts and public charter schools were already listed in state law. So this is not new language.
Yeah, please. I mean, I think this is a really important point because there's a broad assertion by the department here that this is doing something, and I'm reading it over and over again, understanding like why that bracketed language leads to the testimony that you've given in writing and the testimony that you're providing today.
Chair Wagner, so that is correct. So, but by bracketing out the State Board of Education, you remove the ability for there to be a standard statewide.
We could do that.
Yes, you can do that. I'm not arguing, again, like I said at the beginning, I'm not arguing that you don't have the authority to do this. I'm just trying to present some of the information that our team has put forward. So this places the authority in the school district or public charter school to set any kind of graduation requirements that they want to outside of what
the bill does, which is codified in statute, which right now there's this hybrid model where we've got administrative rule through the board and we've got credit requirements in statute. So this would be, here's what we're telling the general public that is 24 credits that you need to be able to graduate. The state board would have the flexibility to provide recommendations to school districts on the essential learning or other things that might meet what the intention was back in 2008 or in the convening that never happened, that we look at modern graduation requirements. So I guess we're just going to have to agree to disagree on that point. So,
Chair Wagner, yeah, I don't actually disagree with what you're saying.
okay, all right.
All I'm saying is that it will be less standard than it is today.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm so sorry that we are at time. I do appreciate your testimony. I see that there's multiple pieces on the record. We have to move to work session. So, Mr. Gill, thank you so much for your testimony. We're going to close public hearing. We're going to go immediately into work session. I'm going to look at, we lost our vice chair. Okay, work session on Senate Bill 1520.
Chair Wagner, I move Senate Bill 1520 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Senator Gelser moves Senate Bill 1520 with to the floor with a due pass recommendation. What's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? Seeing none, motion passes. Closing work session on Senate Bill 1520, opening work session on Senate Bill 1521. Senator Gelser.
Chair Wagner, I move Senate Bill 1521 to the floor with a due pass recommendation and a recommendation that a subsequent referral to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means be added, please.
Senator Gelser moves Senate Bill 1521 to the floor with a due pass recommendation and that a recommendation that a subsequent referral to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means be added. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing none, motion passes. Close work session on Senate Bill 1521. As I stated before, we are very close on 1522. And it's the intention that we will have that bill up for work session. I appreciate everyone's patience today, and with that, we're adjourned.